Welcome to Optimal Timelines. I am your guide, Sean Collins, in helping you to connect to your most optimal future timeline. So it's going to be your monthly Tarotscope readings for the month of March 2022. And remember, you're going to want to watch two videos, one for your North Node by sign and one for your North Node by house. Now, if you're new to the channel, the reason I use the North Node in the readings as opposed to your sun sign, moon sign, or ascendant is because it's recognized in astrology that the North Node is your life's purpose, what you were born to do and accomplish in this lifetime. So I find it's much more relevant across the board for people's lives. So let's get started on the readings. Okay, so this is your reading for March 2022 for everybody with their North Node in Virgo and or the 6th house. So I'm going to connect to the energies and we can begin. I call upon my spirit guides and guardians and the wisdom of my ancestors to bring forth the information that's true and correct for all who see this reading, that it may bring them the most beautiful, happy life possible and set them on their most optimal future timeline. So may it be. Okay, so the spread on this side of the table represents the first half of the month from the 1st to the 15th, and then this side represents the second half of the month from the 16th to the end of the month. And just like last month, I did a book divination or a lithomancy with using the book, the Great North Node book, Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller, Great North Node book. And I did a book divination for all the signs and houses, and for you North Nodes in Virgo and or the 6th house, what I got was fantasy versus reality. And I'll get more into it, what I mean by that. So fantasy versus reality. One of the things that can happen when you have your North Node in Virgo is you have your South Node in Pisces and or the 12th house. Now Pisces rules, imagination, it rules, fantasy, it rules, connecting to these huge, universal energies, spirituality, okay? Your superpower that you have is when you have a South Node in the 12th house and or Pisces, you have an incredible ability for imagination and for fantasy. And that is a superpower, okay? But what ends up happening in this lifetime, because your North Node is in Virgo and or the 6th house, you're supposed to move toward more reality and practicality, okay? And it's, structure, reality, practicality. So what can end up happening, what the example in the book that came up is, let's say in relationships, what can end up happening with the fantasy versus reality is when you have your, you can see things when you have your South Node in Pisces or the 12th house, you can see things from a fantasy point of view. So, people that are around us, a new friend, a new relationship, or relationships and situations around us, we can see them, when you have this placement, as you can see them as from a fantasy point of view, for how you want it to be or how you want it to go. So it applies for everything in your life, not just with people, with situations, jobs, whatever. And what Virgo is practicality and seeing the reality of things, being able to focus on it, data and looking at things from that point of view. What is it that's reality? And the card that popped up, interesting, the Page of Pentacles. And what's the page doing? The page isn't imagining and looking up in the sky or the clouds and in a state of fantasy. The page is holding the pentacles, okay? He's holding it. It's something tangible. It's reality. And he's looking at it in a realistic way. The page knows what it is, that they are holding in their hand. They're holding something that is real and tangible, and not something that is, fantasy. Now, the way that's going to play out this first half of the month is, again, you have the Seven of Pentacles, is you are going to be given the opportunity, and I'm seeing it in two things. I'm seeing it in relationships in your life, and I'm seeing it also, and for a lot of you, it's going to be like newer type relationships, or brand new ones, or in even romantic or friendships or whatever, or even like family members, okay? But I'm seeing it in relationships, and I'm also seeing it in planning for your life, like goals you have, your personal goals in your life. So relationships and your personal goals. And what ends up happening is when a person goes into a state of fantasy, they're projecting that fantasy, and they don't even know they're doing it, but they're projecting that fantasy onto a situation or a person. So for example, let's say a person meets another person, and we'll just say it could be anything. It could be work or whatever. We'll just say it's a romantic situation, okay? And they meet someone, and they begin to see that person and date them. And then what ends up happening, what I'm talking about, reality versus fantasy, is, because you'll understand this if I give a couple of examples. They could start to dream or project on that person a fantasy of, not the reality of the person or the situation, but they build up a fantasy around it, almost like a character, using their imagination. And then that can happen also with situations like a job, and you build up this image or fantasy in your mind, and it's not really the reality. Now, this is true because if you have your North Node in Virgo and or the 6th house, here's the key. I'm going to ask you a question. Isn't it true that throughout your life there have been situations, in job situations, romantic situations, family situations, friend situations, where how you thought it was, like your fantasy of how it was, turned out to be completely not true? So basically, the fantasy it went poof and went and was gone. Okay. Now think about it. You've experienced that a lot, and don't beat yourself up about it. But what it is it's your natural, because you have a superpower of imagination. Okay. So what ends up happening is, if you really want to move forward in life and relationships, and that's what I see this first half of the month, is try to see the person or situation for what it really is, and try not to project any sort of a fantasy on there. Try to resist, and how do you do that? So let's say, as again, I'll use the example of you're starting to see someone, date someone or whatever. Really stop when you're thinking about the person or whatever. Let's say you've gone on a few dates or whatever. And like I said, you can apply this to anything, a job or whatever, but just you stop at some point and say, okay, am I seeing this correctly? And what that is, that's that Virgo North Node. You're taking the situation, the person, whatever, and you're analyzing it, and you're saying, okay, am I seeing the reality of this? So just like this Page of Pentacles, you just hold that in your hand and you're like, okay, is this person what I'm projecting them to be? Is this job, is this situation, is this, family member, am I seeing it correctly? And you're using the power of the planet Mercury, intellect, the ability to focus and look at things correctly. And if you find that, okay, wow, I did not see this correctly, what ends up happening is probably when, if you look back when you were younger, when this happened, like you had a friendship and then it wasn't like you thought, it was a relationship, it wasn't like you thought, a job. Think back, was it the person, the job, the situation's fault? Or was it maybe you weren't looking at it, the reality of it? Okay. Now, what ends up happening with this is that this is how it can really help your life. You're like, everyone asks like, okay, what is the value in this? When you see things for what they are, you are not disappointed because you're seeing like the reality of the situation, okay? You're able to make better decisions because you're not making decisions or reacting from the fantasy or reacting to the reality of it. So it makes your life go much more, smooth. Remember, in this lifetime, it's all about, and I know this does not sound like fun or sexy or whatever, okay? It's all about practicality. It's about routines. It's about being down to earth, Virgo, okay? It's about being, using your intellect and your power of, analyzing things and seeing the reality of things. So 2 things in this first half of the month, as I said, it's going to be through relationships, and try to step back. If you start to feel disappointed about someone or some situation, step back and say, okay, is it because did they disappoint me, or did this situation disappoint me because I projected something that was not true? Okay. Now, moving on to the second half of the month, I'm seeing a couple of things. I'm seeing that what's wanting to happen the second half of March is you may have to look at plans you've made for your future, okay, and reevaluate them. That's one of the things that's coming up advice-wise for you. So plans in your life, what are they? It's not only career work, it's plans you've made for a family, or plans you've made for, a business you wanted to start or something like that. Some sort of a plan that you made. I think that there's some sort of a fantasy that you have created in your mind, like a fairy tale fantasy, okay? And dreaming and imagination, like Einstein said, imagination is more important than intellect, and that's why that's your superpower. However, when we're dealing with our north and south nodes, since you've already have this power, if imagination is overused in this life for you, it ends up putting you on a wrong timeline, or not the best timeline that you could be on, okay? So something has to be reevaluated. So plans you made, that means going back and doing what the Page of Pentacles is saying, okay, this is the plan that I had. Is this reality? And go step by step and say, okay, make adjustments. Don't feel sad or stressed or anything like that if you have to change your idea about a person, about a situation, about plans you have for the future, don't beat yourself up and don't worry about it. Don't let it stress you out. It just means that, you have an amazing power of imagination, and you might have projected more fantasy on it than needs to be there. Okay. There will be a time and a place when you will be able to use your imagination. How can it be used properly? Well, it could be used properly for thinking of, creative and imaginative ways of working in your life without projecting, just like creative and imaginative ways of dealing with people and relationships. Now, the other thing besides this future plan that you might have to reevaluate is I'm seeing something in your past regarding a past relationship. It could be like, a sibling, a parent, a family member, it could even be like a past work relationship, but something in your past. I believe that, there's been a story that's been creative, a fantasy story that's been creative that needs to be reevaluated. And that fantasy could have been like a negative, because you can create positive fantasies and you can create negative fantasies, okay? And I think this one could be like a more negative fantasy. But for some of you, it could be like let's say you built up something more than the reality of it, okay? So I feel like the second half of the month, you're going to be reevaluating, that, okay? Again, what I'm seeing a lot for the North Nodes is when you do this reevaluation and you're seeing things from a more clear, perspective and seeing more of the reality of situations and people, it's giving that vitality to your life. Now, what this is, okay, you see this Two of Swords, okay? This means many things, but she has the swords of the mind and of the intellect crossed over her heart. She has a blindfold on, and in the back you see this body of water, this lake or this ocean behind her. The ocean represents Pisces, Neptune, okay? And, also over her heart, her intuition. Fantasies are in her eyes, which is, the eyes are looking at things in perspective. So what she's doing is she is going back and she is blocking the flow. And a lot of, this is a good card in this sense because she's blocking the flow of emotions, and blocking the flow of, which in this case is like the imagination, okay? And being able to see things clearly, as clear as day, as clear as crystal, okay? That's what this is. This is where I think you can go. When you do that this month, think of every way you can take these old patterns and change them and see them for what they are. As I said, it's going to open up that flow in your life, and you're going to flow in a better direction. When you start going toward that North Node in Virgo and over the 6th house, you're going to start to really, really feel like you're on your path, and you will feel better than your fantasies ever made you feel, okay? And so again, hopefully this is making sense, but I want you to, again, think back on your life. Think about how many times situations, people, have disappointed you because you thought it was one way and wasn't the other. I want you to understand that most of the time it was because you had a fantasy built up around that situation or person and not seeing things for reality, for what it truly is. And just really quickly, how, in a practical way, how could that help you? Well, like, let's say, again, I'll use that romantic situation. Someone meets someone else, okay, and they're interesting and there's attraction, and then they start to like spend a little time together. Well, if you're creating a fantasy around that person, you're not seeing things for what they are. You're not seeing red flags of like how the situation really is. And then one day reality kind of, you come face to face with reality and you're like, whoa. So like it's kind of important and serious stuff. When you think about it, people wake up all of a sudden in marriages or relationships and they're like, what the hell did I do? And that's because, again, I have a video, if you want to look at, through my videos, I made a video on love, and I'm doing a whole like series on love. But love is something that can blind people because they're blinded by feelings. And what that is, like when you get blinded by love, what you're doing is you're creating a fantasy, okay? And not seeing things for how they really are. And so that's how people fall into the trap. That's the danger of not being able to see, is you can find yourself in, like, wake up one day and you're like, oh my gosh, like, how did I get here? Because this is not the way I imagined it, okay? That's the value and the importance of this. That's why this came up. So I don't want you to think like this is like not important, because this is like really important. If you can start to do this, because then you can start to look back on your life and say, okay, maybe this situation that happens, maybe I didn't have the right perspective. And again, don't beat yourself up. It's just making adjustments. Remember, going on our optimal timeline and following our North Node is not always easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, okay? It's not. But I can tell you, it's so beneficial. You will see changes in your life that you will never see by just following the tides of the daily astrology or following the tides of a reading. Like, when you start honing in on your North Node, you will see changes, positive changes in your life like you've never seen before. And that's what I'm seeing here, is like, you have this opportunity this month and there's a real turning point here. So anyway, I hope this reading was helpful to you and that it resonated with you. Thank you so much for watching, liking, sharing, and subscribing. And if you could, hitting that like button really, really helps out. It takes a quick second, just ding it, because it really helps the channel with the algorithms. And then dropping a comment, even just, hi, what's up? I love connecting with you. It also helps the algorithms. And ask any questions. Also, if you'd like a personal reading, there'll be a link in the description box below, and I can explain to you what it all entails. So thank you again, and we'll see you on some more videos. Many blessings.